Hello, everyone. I'm Rhonda Goodman-Gagan, the Assistant Director and Curator here at the Heller Center for Arts and Humanities. Welcome to our program of the spring 2023 semester, our winter salon with Haleh Abghari. She is the Senior Instructor and Director of Voice in the Department of Visual and Performing Arts, and she's been here at UCCS since 2015. She has a bachelor's from the University of California at Davis and a master's at the Peabody Institute, which is part of the Johns Hopkins University. She's performed all over the world, festivals and conservatories in places like Italy and Hungary, where she spent a year as a Fulbright scholar. Her work has been described by the New York Times as a virtuoso and winning performance, and the Washington Post described her soprano voice as high, dry, sweet, and piercingly pure. In her work, she aims to promote social justice, active citizenship, civic dialogue, and finding new forms of political expression through the arts. Her talk tonight is called Voices Without Borders. And in this talk, her talk will focus on the history, technical aspects, and inspiration behind her approach to vocal music, and draw cultural connections to places such as Panama, Hungary, Guatemala, Iran, and Korea. And she's going to provide some examples of all of that. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Haleh.
Thank you. I'm despite the weather challenges. Thank you for hosting me here. So, a nice cozy crowd. Please feel free to eat and drink and go, and casual about this. So as I was telling Max, the biggest problem I have with this talk is how to get in what I want to get in within the limited time. So you feel free to tell me, I'm talking too much. And also, very few of us, we can be interactive and we can talk, so it doesn't have to be one-way conversation. Instead of starting by talking, I'd rather start by playing something, and then we can just, maybe that will get us in a place to talk about it. So this is the piece. I hate the title, it's not mine. I did this in Italy in a barn, and the video artist that filmed it named it. He called it Voice of the Soul. That's not my title. I call it a vocal essay. Multiple vocal essays. And yeah, he did all the video work and he posted it online. So here we go. That's some really interesting YouTube comment. We were saying like, imagine being married to where suddenly she starts singing in the shower. All that stuff. But I'm just wondering, any words that jump out at you hearing this, adjectives or descriptive thoughts? Including things like unpleasant, ugly is fine, you know, just curious.
I think voice of the soul is a good attempt to
Like, you're
capture.
cool with the Italian guys,
It's funny that you said ugly, but I think because I mean it, but not in a pejorative sense at all, not in a negative sense. There was kind of like freedom to be ugly at certain moments. And to let your voice be ugly, but ugly doesn't even become the right word.
No, but it's according to, you know,
Yeah.
regular standards of, you know, beautiful voice and, you know, beautiful singing, what we studied as bel canto in tradition
Sure.
of Italian, you know, beautiful singing. This kind of goes against a lot of this work, what I teach and also what I studied myself. Anyone else? You don't have to, but.
It felt to me at some point almost, I don't know, I don't mean to objectify it, but like that you were like an instrument, your voice was an instrument being played in different ways.
Yeah, yeah. So actually, everything that you said kind of feeds into what I'm hoping to talk about more, which is extended vocal work, extended vocal techniques. So yeah, so there is the standard classical training, which I've done and which I teach because students need to have healthy vocalization. We all do. But then I also discovered these other ways of making sound that go beyond those parameters, that broaden the scope of expression and the palette of sound. And also I have been very much involved in theater, especially when I lived in New York, especially with the Lower East Side and like East Village groups doing theater. So it also becomes a more theatrical instrument. I'm able to express so much more, do so much more. And you know, when I play a lot of the avant-garde music that is hard for some of my students to hear, putting like atonal music and you know, I tell them like, why do you don't want always like easy listening to be like fall asleep to, like why do you get on a roller coaster? Why do you eat spicy food? Why do you watch scary movies? I mean, you always, you know, push your boundaries, but when it gets to music, suddenly it has to be pretty dull. So I have been able to like really enjoy broadening what I feel like I can do by using some of these extended techniques. I don't do it in Mozart. You know, I love that stuff too. I love art songs, Schubert and all that stuff, but I kind of got into extended vocal techniques from, you know, my my years at Peabody studying there. I've worked with a lot of composers and visual artists and theater artists, a lot of collaboration. Rosalie collaborated with my class in dance. I don't dance, but I do music. She does dance, and so did Stacy. So I love that kind of crossing of the disciplines also. But there's so many works that I could play that I don't have time to, but I've done things like 8 songs for Matt King, which was written for a pioneer of extended voice work, Roy Hart, South African pioneer, who had an incredible range. And you know, the story of King George III, which was also in the movie The Madness of King George. Interestingly, this is a side note, and I should not digress too much, but you know, for years we've all thought that he had porphyria, which caused his madness. There's new research, including reading the notes of the people who treated him and his servants and all that, that Malcolm was bipolar. There's actually interesting new research. But anyway, that one is like, how do you vocalize to depict madness? And it can't become a screaming and shouting contest, which it often becomes at these, unfortunately. But there's very specific musical ideas written. And I've also done recitations by Georges Afgharis, a French Greek composer. I'm going to play some of that for you, and I have some scores also to hand out to give you some examples. And these are all, like I said, like, well, George, 8 songs for Matt King was written in 1959. The Afgharis recitations in the 70s. And also like works by George Crumb, which include extended voice work, as well as, you know, combining it with music of the past, folk music, extended techniques, not just for voice, but for instrument. There's also an element of ritual to it. So I'm interested in incorporating all of these things into my work too. And there's also big element of storytelling, for most of it. Now, interestingly, this piece had no story. It was completely unplanned. This Italian guy, we barely spoke the same language, you know, we kind of communicated, said, can you come and we'll make a video together in a barn on a very hot day in the summer in southern Italy. I showed up, he started, and I just went. So this was just improvised on tape, totally unplanned. And then when I, in the US, I find out it was on YouTube. I'm like, oh, great, thanks for asking. So he posted it, and but I actually really like the journey that it takes vocally, what it does. And like I said, I wasn't thinking consciously what I'm going to do, but the transformations that happen, that kind of ends up in almost like a folk song kind of bit. And then I like a hard ending. I hate fade outs. So I happen to have these metallic objects that we took from an abandoned factory, and I just brought them with me. I didn't know, and that ended up becoming my ending. So none of that was planned. But what I love that he did a couple of years later is that he showed this and he used some stills and the video at an event in Italy that was had to do with resistance. Well, it had to do with stopping violence against women. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense to me, and how these kind of like some of these calls and some of these shouts and different sounds can you know, address that issue and think about that. And since then, I have done work that kind of addresses that more directly, even if the audience didn't know it. But from that, let me just play you a little bit of, so this is my own piece that I created. Again, it was an improvisation, but I want to play a little bit of Ancient Voices of Children by George Crumb. The poetry is by Federico Garcia Lorca. And the piece opens with solo voice singing into the piano. The piano is open. Yeah. The George Crumb scores are gorgeous and they are humongous. You couldn't see me because it was like, you know, they're huge. But the pedal is held down so that you can hear the echo. Let me mute that tab so not like oops. Say hello, no, thank you. Okay, so this is a bit of Ancient Voices of Children. Now I tried to get rid of the ads on these, but when first I had no idea SoundCloud does ads now, because I don't go to listen to myself because I don't have that stuff. So I didn't realize I have to listen to ads to hear my own material. So interesting, capitalism. Thank you. So this is the opening. There's some of the other instruments, like the piano comes in. Actually, I have the score, so I'm going to play it and I'll show you the score. Great thing. Sorry, that score didn't, this is on my computer, I'm not used to it, but it wasn't loading that. I just tried to show you a little bit, so you know that it's precisely notated. That all the pitches are very exact, including at the lap. That's all precisely notated. I haven't been practicing, so that, I'm not gonna demonstrate on that. Yeah, I actually thought about doing things live, and I was like, well, with my full-time job teaching, and there's no way I can care like all of these things. So they've taken months to do. So that's a bit of like somebody else's work that I really love and do. And again, this piece, if you listen to the whole thing, there's the poetry of Lorca is so beautiful, and from, as I said, other pieces of Lorca to music. And I think it's a very effective piece. And again, there's a real strong sense of ritual. There's influences from other cultures, like there's the way he uses the banjo, it almost sounds like a Chinese instrument. There's three percussionists, huge percussion setup. There's harp, so it's a, and then at the end there's also a voice soprano who comes out and interacts with the singer. And I've seen actually a stage version of this too. So again, I'm kind of speeding through because I have to. So I apologize for that. But the works of Georges Abghari are extremely challenging. He combines, he calls it music dash theater, not musical theater. It's not Broadway type of stuff, but there's a strong element of theatrics built into his pieces. These recitations that I've done, there's a whole book of them. I haven't done all of them. They actually, I think hardly any of them have, they have directions, but they don't have expressions assigned to many of the pieces. So I ended up creating my own versions of them. And he uses fake language, like it sounds like Russian, but it's really not. It sounds like French, but it's not. Or it's a combination of things. I'm actually going to play number 11. Where's my 11? Okay. And I'm going to score for that. You don't worry about reading everything you see, but just, and I built this up for myself. Do you mind passing it? And then maybe more, I have more. So you start from the top, and there's a few units. I'm just going to, because they're not real words and syllables. And it kind of adds on, it's additive. Each line adds something to the beginning and something to the end, something to the beginning and something to the end. And it grows. And I ended up planning to do this. I have a lot more because I have everything. Wasted on paper. So it's very precise again, but there's no, like you said, expression assigned to it or how you do it. So I kind of did a, I just switched, well, like I said, sometimes they're not. Yeah, time for the whole thing, but like, that means this is longer than that. Get the chunk in the middle. So what I chose to do was to switch characters, just like at weird times, just mid sentence, if you can call it a sentence. I call these sentences. But I've seen people who just do them straight all the way through. So every interpretation is completely different. And I've tried to get my students to do these, but the next one I'm going to play.
Sorry, this is like, this is blowing. Because this reminds me of when you talk to like, it reminds me of when you talk to an actor who takes on one of these monumental, right? And you have to say, well, what are you going to do, right? I think of Not I by Beckett. It's a model. Yeah, like one of these ones. That's
Yeah.
okay. Well, no, I just wonder, I just am so interested in what are the questions that you have to ask? How do you find a way in? How, what are the traps and how are you avoiding that? I'm just really interested in the process of.
Well, I'm going to start. I like this interview that Sidney Poitier did once and talked about how, when he was a child, he was so poor he didn't have a mirror. He had never seen his own face. But he used to play with his shadow. He would run and his shadow chasing each other. And I kind of react to the shadow in the moment. And I kind of feel like improvisation is a little bit like that. And because also the process of discovering, it's an improvise, but what I find dramatically in it, it was as if my voice was my shadow. And I was playing with it. So I was doing this, meanwhile responding to my own voice with my voice in the moment. And I also I would rehearse these just without any plan, without any I would not assign a character or kind of presupposed, idea or anything. But I was it was going in my head while I'm reading the subway in New York while I'm walking down the street. And I remember one time I saw a guy, this guy, he had the most incredible posture, but it was the most uncomfortable thing I would have seen. It wasn't but it was the curvature that was so weird. So sometimes these things would come into my interpretation of the piece, but the piece is running in my head while I see these things and discover. So both in terms of in the moment responding to my voice, what it evokes, and I respond to it immediately. So if I hear a sound something, I go into that voice. Go into that little high pitch thing. So again, it's like a shadow of the voice that is chasing me and I'm chasing it. So I try now to find there was another time right before a concert when I was doing a bunch of these. I was just like today, I was can we raise this? Because I was hunched over at the music stand and I was just drilling it. They have to drill these things there. There's also that's just just drill. Just repeat Not I.
Yeah.
Which is that you have to just becomes fluid.
Right.
You can't think. It has to just prevail. And I was doing it, I was doing this, and I was God, why am I doing it? This is such an uncomfortable position. Then I decided, that's much more interesting than the fact that I'm going to be sitting and doing this. So I did a performance in that very uncomfortable position that it added to the way the voice was struggling to come out. And so it's this constant discovery for me for these pieces. While I do them, I would see what's going on. And I build on that. Does that answer that a little bit?
Yeah, that's great.
But there's also the element of clinical, read the line. And this next piece.
All right, Haleh, can I jump on it? Thanks for the answer. It's so fascinating. And how do you what I know of singers is that you all think a lot about the breath and how long it is and when you're going to breathe, right? So I love that you're just talking about all this improvisation. So do you probably aren't writing in breath marks for yourself. So
not this piece.
Yeah, not in this piece. So is that's just part of your freedom that you find as you're improvising, you're just whatever happens gonna happen. And you're okay with that.
Well, it's not integral to the grammar of the text the way it is for Schubert or Bach, where he doesn't give you any room to breathe. You have split second.
Right.
It's like an instrumental line that's good. So those are very totally different approach. These, like I said, he hasn't told you you have.
Right.
Actually, there's one piece that he says do it on one grab, but it's impossible. So I fake doing it. There's another thing that I do puppetry with my ear. I do it in the dark. but I use my ear and mouth. But yeah, so that's not something I worry about so much, and this is an expressive thing, like I said, in that sense, when you have to show like, you're doing the whole thing, and I think a real weird voice like. That, and then it just goes on and hand to take a lot of gas of air. This next piece, unfortunately, I don't have a score for this, but this is the most difficult one because it's all pitched. And it's a triangle. I'll pass you some of his other scores just so you get a sense of what they look like. But this piece is all on but it's the same form. The next piece it's also pitched and then also a triangle. And this one took me the longest to learn. I just have to lock myself. I was at an artist residency in Montalvo when I just did it for hours and hours. That's what's being happened. Just skip ahead. We'll go on.
Improves quality sleep is vital to your mental, emotional, and physical health.
Sorry.
It doesn't sound like you are reading.
I was reading, but yeah, so that one, if I lose focus for a moment, I am, because it's not easy to get back on. That one live, so I don't know, I just have to practice that one, I am reading.
Yeah.
Actually, well, not one of those people who can hold their breath for a long time. I don't remember. But it's very quick, but the thing is staying on pitch. This one is like, I said, it has to be very precise. So this one took a lot of work. You were seeing with other. Oh, yeah. A lot. And it manages to. I don't do, this is not the only. This is not,
You have.
I'm not produced ensemble, but the recitations are very specific to.
With one voice.
Yeah, these are different for solo voice. Recitación for voice for all of them. Yeah, but there are ensemble pieces, very elaborate ensemble pieces. I actually met him briefly in Vienna. Funny thing is, like I did these at a Sonic Film Festival in New York just after I finished school. I don't know, I was still in school. Sorry, my teacher was in the Sonic Film Festival. We did it at Miller Theater, and I was just supposed to represent the group of the gala for all these different groups that were going to do this festival. And no one had done these pieces in New York before, and I was like 20 something. I was completely like, wasn't expecting anything. And shortly after that, I flew to Germany. I was doing some weird work with a Polish video artist and DJ. They were always high, and it was really hard to work with them because they didn't communicate. So they insisted that I be high. So it was like, I can't sing. But anyway, so in that moment, then my friend faxed me a New York Times review of this and had like my picture, and I was like, oh my God. And like I said, I was in school. So this was like, it really kind of helped me. And that's how I actually got noticed in New York from these pieces. So I I owe these pieces a lot. But yeah, so they're incredibly fun. Like this one has this one I have the score.
Did he write these for a particular singer?
I don't think so. I think there's singers that he works with regularly. Like, he
Yeah.
has his own group, and he worked like his own atelier, his own studio in France. I was more aware of what he was doing years ago. But kind of not able to get into this stuff as much as I would like to with the teaching. Because this stuff takes a lot of time to learn. But this piece, it has these vocal sounds, some pitch, some unpitched, and coughing built into it. And one thing that really interested me, also thinking of these pieces, I was doing these pieces before I worked in radio. I worked in radio in New York around 2008, 2000-ish, I don't remember exactly, but for WNYC, I did overnight music. I was hosting and programming. And, you have to speak so properly and like not do awkward pauses or that kind of thing. And we weren't supposed to edit, we were just supposed to record ourselves, but I learned to edit under software. And I became obsessed with like removing any unpleasant sound, any little weird, or well, that kind of thing. Then I was always biking home. I was biking. I was like, it's really interesting. Those are all like the garbage of speech, He uses them to orchestrate and create pieces. He uses them as language and instrument. So I was like, wow, instead of like editing my radio kind of like, commentary about pieces to remove all the bad stuff and keep the text, what if I kept all the, garbage? Kind of like turn that into a piece. So that kind of like fed into my thinking about these things, kind of informed how I think about these, like every bit of speech, you can use every sound can be utilized in a musical way. That conversation can be bigger, but I'll play you a little bit stopping piece, which gets in my version progressively worse. But that's not what he wrote. There's no indication of again how you're supposed to do it. So again, I may skip some of it, and then I'm sorry. Am I okay? I'm fine. Tiny, I can't see what I'm giving you, but I have that one too. Okay. Yeah, that one is another one. That's another one. This one is 3 recitations that can be done individually or simultaneously, like different characters, like kind of going a little schizophrenic between them, like just switch personalities. But this last one is the calming one that I did. Sorry. So you can just get the sense of the contour. You can't read it in that side.
So you said these are big.
They're 11 by 17, but actually they're really tiny. Even that I have to blow up because there's a big white border or whatever. They're hard to see. That's another thing. And handwritten. I don't even know what the call. It's called. And I have one of my closest friends speak perfect French. She's actually Korean, but she's my French and Korean coach. And she would help me decode the directions or anything. But yeah, I can't tell without my real glasses here. But there is that first sound up top is a cough, and it's like I said, additive. Each line. So just so you get the gist of it. Sorry. So that was my interpretation, I mean, we have to build up on the coughing and not a good thing for COVID times now, but. So that's just a quick kind of sampling of some of these recitations for solo voice. Now, you know, we can talk about like all these extended techniques in Western avant-garde music, and that's, you know, continuous part of the, you know, the older classical music, Western art music, but you can really find them in different cultures and traditions going way back centuries. So I want to give you a little sampling of some of the traditions that I have been, you know, I haven't like, I wouldn't pretend to like know these things, because they take serious like dedication, devotion, and immersion in the culture, studying the language, and working decades, not a whole lifetime to develop true understanding, but these are influences on me. One of them is actually from Iran, and I should have said in the beginning, I am from Iran, so I grew up there till I was 15. So that music is very much in my ear. I didn't study Persian classical music. It's something I would love to do if I had the time, because it's a very complex system of, you know, construction of melodies. But just a quick kind of run through, like 2 minutes of each. Hansori is a tradition of storytelling with exaggerated vocal work and drum. It's usually one singer and a drummer, but it can be figuration from Korea. And this is something, I'll play you the first 2 minutes of this video that actually tells you what I was going to tell you about what it is. So this is
Manzoni is a prominent expression of Korea's rich performance tradition. It is a genre of musical storytelling performed by a vocalist accompanied by a drum. This popular tradition, characterized by expressive singing, stylized speech, a repertoire of narratives and magnetic gestures, embraces both elite and folk culture. During performances that can last up to 8 hours, a male or female singer, accompanied by a single barrel drum, improvises from texts, combining global Korean dialect with erudite literary expressions. The term Manzoni is derived from the Korean words pan, meaning place where many people gather, and song, song. Manzoni originated in southwest Korea in the 17th century, probably as a new expression of the inherited songs of shaders. It remained an oral tradition among the common people until the late 19th century, at which time it had acquired a more sophisticated instrument, and so enjoyed considerable popularity in the urban elite.
Manzoni singers undergo long and rigorous training to master the wide range of distinct vocal registers and to memorize their complex repertoires. Many virtuosos have developed their own interpretive styles and are renowned for their original performances of specific episodes.
The settings, characters, and situations that make up.
so it started in the 17th century. It's actually not that old, but you know, I thought it was like much older. But then in the 18th century, they got set onto 12 different stories that are fixed. All the audiences know all these stories. And like you said, they can go from like 3 hours to 8 hours all night. I mean, that takes so much stamina. And my Korean friend told me you don't graduate till you speak from your throat. They was up speaking metaphors, but you know, it's really harsh, serious vocalization. And by the way, it's really important to have vocal health for those of us who want to do different kinds of singing. So I don't like to sit and do this kind of thing for 8 hours in a row. I know how to manage it, and different ways of making sure I'm loose and relaxed when I practice it, but I don't repeat it like to death. Yeah.
I couldn't tell from the way they were singing. Are they singing from their diaphragm or are they singing from their throat? I mean, it's just mean, you're right, stamina is great, but how do they maintain that for
Well,
decades?
I haven't done that specific training, so I don't know how they're told to do it, but even like when I did a class for King, which had a lot of like what my teacher was calling the engine sound, like I had to like drop, not go. That hurt. Like try to really relax the larynx as much as possible, and always support from your lungs and from your diaphragm. However you want to call it. But I always talk about expanding the back, so not the front, because people always think it's the belly, but it's all around the rib cage expanding to fully support. So a lot of, and you think with your full body, you cannot think from here up. If you do that, you're dead. But yeah, I'm sure, like I said, I don't know their methodology precisely, but this, I have done work that this inspired a lot, and the audiences know these stories, and they get into it, and they kind of run and like kind of like in a bullfighting situation, they go, ole, kind of that kind of exchange with the audience. I actually saw, these are like I said, old stories. There's a film called Chunhyanga. That's one of the stories, Chunhyang, the legend of Chunhyang. It's like kind of their Romeo and Juliet story. It's actually made into a full feature film, high production values, but the whole thing is narrated by a concert singer. So you watch this beautiful movie, there's dialogue, but somebody is singing, telling the story behind it. There's a storyteller the whole time. So yeah, this is fascinating. But what I saw in New York at the Korean embassy some years ago, a young concert singer did a modern, kind of her own take on pansori. She took the story of Mother Courage, and she did it in pansori style, but the instrument included synthesizers and electric guitars, and it was so well done. I wasn't crazy about the instrument. I prefer this older thing, but it was great that she's keeping that tradition alive, because right now it's all K-pop and you don't hear about pansori, so that's one. The other one, real quick, is Inuit throat singing. We actually used it in Per Good, the production that, were you here?
Yeah.
Were you with that? So I had the trolls do throat singing in the tradition of Inuit throat singing for that, because I was like, what kind of singing would trolls do? And the students were both fascinated but had enough of me kind of like teaching them throat singing. So I'm going to show you a little bit of these two Canadian sisters, and notice how they physically connect when they sing. Just a little bit of this.
One's black, stars is black, and one's wondering. My name is Karen Cutler, and I'm an Inuit throat singer and drum dancer. My name is Kathy Cutler, and I'm an Inuit throat singer and drum dancer. Yeah, that's good. We are in Anchorage, Alaska. We are here to perform at the Sequitur Music Festival. The sounds that we're going to be making is you have to make sure that you're breathing out as much as you're breathing in, or else you might get lightheaded. Inuit throat singing is a friendly conversation between the girls. It was something that they would do while the men were out hunting. We do imitations of the sounds that we hear around us, like animals and tools in nature. It's the same sound, but only a half second off from each other, and that's how we can blend our voice. Throat singing comes from our voice, our throat, and our breathing. Enjoy throat singing. It is part of the culture that we're from, Inuit culture.
Time, I'm going to stop it, otherwise I'll love it's not stop. I won't play you this next video I was going to, but Thamyris is an Inuit superstar musician. Do you know her work? She's been years in Colorado Springs apparently. Here. This is actually an instructional video of how to explain a little bit about the sound. Sorry, not today. It's great actually. She wants to say what's what she comes with something. So that's one. And then Persian classical music and the tradition of Naqali or Pardafani, which is a tradition of storytelling against these like huge tapestries that show these epic scenes from epic poems by Ferdowsi, one of the 11th century poet, the Shahnameh, which is one of the longest epic poems in the world. But I'll give you a little bit sample of Persian music. This is unfortunately recently deceased singer, probably the best singer Iran has ever had. This is called the Bird of Dawn, and this is also kind of a protest song. That's his son. This is a really beautiful song, but it also has to do with like the freedom of this bird, which for the people of Iran, there's so much oppression. It has a lot of meaning. If you watch the video through, you are crying, getting very emotional about it. But then there's this tradition. So that's just a very brief. Now this other one, this is the tradition of Naqali or Pardafani, which is a curtain reading, literally translated, which is, like I said, you have a tapestry like that painting. That whole thing is usually very busy, multiple characters. Like, so you have a linear story, but like the beginning and the end of the story are all into one tapestry. And the storyteller takes you through it. And sometimes it's just enhanced speech. Sometimes there's singing. A lot of times there's interestingly drums, like in Pansuri. There is some actually parallels. So this video that I recently discovered, I'll play a bit of it, which talks about the tradition and gives you some sampling. And you think not everyone doing it is a man, because this is a very patriarchal society, but there's actually a woman in modern times doing it too, but it's very much a male tradition.
In dramatic storytelling, or Naqali, is the forefather of the Iranian traditional theater, where the Naqal or reciter narrates either a historical or a non-historical tale in prose or poetry to his audience. Structurally speaking, Naqali is of two major forms. One is sung and accompanied by musical instruments. The other is performed without a musical instruments. Enjoy certain ever since the ancient times and all across the country, Naqali has been practiced among different ethnic groups.
You see it actually happening in places like this, most traditional, in the old days, coffee houses, tea houses, they would have the hookahs and they would sit for hours and enjoy these stories and drink and smoke.
These genres of epic, mythical, legendary, and life. The Naqals usually pick the stories to be told, or rather acted, from the classical Persian literature or the folklore of the diverse communities scattered throughout the territory. However, since Firdusi composed his epic masterpiece, the Shahnameh in the 11th century, tales from Shahnameh began to top the performances in that their audience demanded.
Shahnameh is that epic book that I was telling you about. Normally, like I said, there's one tapestry that they go through. I guess now they have PowerPoints and like shows and all that. Usually it's condensed into one image, but we have these demons. I mean, there's Rostam is the hero. He has so many battles with demons, and at the end, he actually has a battle with his own son. He doesn't know it's his son. There's a lot to it. That it's also there's a great English translation by Dick Davis. That the guy is insane. I mean, he did such a great job with that. But I want to show you a little bit of the lady.
Making use of various gestures and calls and adopting different verbal tones, the Nahar so elaborately portrays the setting to the audience that they feel themselves at the scene. He acts for all characters of the story, adopting a certain tone for each. Nahars are also talented in producing sound effects.
So yeah, so there's like a one person film, like the sound effects, the in the background, the storytelling, the dialogue, everybody does all these. So these are, like I said, some of the traditions that I'm constantly looking at and drawing from to kind of inform the work, but also just keep us in our place thinking that, you know, Western music has it all figured out, but there's so much rooted in these old traditions that existed long before. And the last thing, can I?
I'll wait until you do the last one, so, because the question is.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
It's just, I mean, as someone who studies this and actually someone who vocalizes this, how easy has it been for you over the years to switch between different cultural scene techniques, backgrounds? I mean, from Western to Eastern to Middle East, and what we call the Middle East. I mean, how has it been for you in terms of how you train your voice to keep it healthy?
Well, like I said, I'm not at all pretending to be a master of any of these traditions. I'm taking advantage of them. I'm enjoying them. I'm trying not to culturally appropriate, but you know, have to inform my work and tell my students about it. I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, I'm too greedy. I don't want to just do the one thing that I've been told to do, you know, by my maybe old teachers. So I'm very much interested in exploring what the voice can do, what the human voice can do, what the boundaries are, what the limitations are, how we can push it. So and if you know that means I will never sing magic flute, that's okay with me. But you know but it's like I've been able to do it because, like I said, I don't like sit and do something that's hard on the voice over and over. I know enough to know how to not to abuse it. But you know, I can push it like in performance. Like when I do the mat piece on for Matt King, which is written for a man, I beg them, don't schedule me for a rehearsal that morning. I need to be just mute. I need to be absolutely quiet so the larynx can relax and be in the lowest position possible. Because the more I talk, my voice is going to get higher and higher as I teach or as I sing and I teach lessons. My voice goes higher, my larynx goes in a higher position. It's really hard to let it drop. So I need to like be totally chill. Like have me do as little as possible, so then I can let it rip in performance, and that's it. I'm not gonna do it. It's not like I'm doing 8 shows a week like we do on Broadway, you know. So I'm very careful with it. But like I said, there are also different ways of doing it. It is a balancing act, but I'm too greedy not to do it, and not so. I don't feel like I'm so special to, you know, protect myself from all these elements. I think they make it richer, a richer experience. So, so this is not actually the last video, but just to give you a little bit of something influenced by Persian music that I've done. This is in a Gala Daviga version with Fred Ho's Afro-Asian ensemble. I'm the Fred Ho. So he passed away some years ago from cancer, but he was a very difficult, interesting person. He was actually part of the Black Panthers. He got kicked out of it. He picks a lot of fights with people. His music is really interesting. So he had everything for him is political. This Afro-Asian ensemble that I was lucky to form with, it was incredible musicians. He was, like I said, a difficult person, but really interesting music. He also was a great baritone sax player. So we did some stuff with him, but you'll hear this is a very different take in a Gala Daviga, but I don't know. Goes on to have a much longer version on SoundRes.
On Thursday, February 16th.
I'm not going to play you this, but this Kathy Berberian piece called Strip City, there's a score that's all made of comic strip images. So you can explore that on your own if you want. I can also email any of you any of the links if you want. I have the score for this also if anybody wants it, but this video mixes her performance with the comic strip score, so you can see the images. But the last topic I want to touch on, I don't know how much time do I have.
Yeah, time. There's one of the radiators on.
So the composer, Rhonda mentioned, I spent a year in Hungary. I was studying the work of George Kurta. He's a living composer, born 19. Oh my God, what's today? His birthday is February 19th, so it's in a few days. Today's 16. 1926. And there's Samuel Beckett, as promised. And he's a composer that's very important to me. I could do a whole talk on him, so I just have to jump ahead. His music, for me, is some of the most intense and expressive that I've encountered, and it's extremely important to me. He speaks multiple languages, but he's struggling. Everything for him is a struggle. He has a bit of a stutter when he speaks. I'll just play you a little bit of him just so you know what this he talks, but this is a piece he wrote to text by Samuel Beckett called What is the War? Now, Samuel Beckett wrote this for Joe Chaikin, an actor in New York who ended up, I think it was a heart condition that he gave him aphasia. So he's lost his ability to speak completely. And for an actor to do that, it's, the end of your work. But this piece was about his struggle, what it was about not being able to speak. Now, Kurta wrote a piece for Ildiko Monadnock, a Hungarian actress who was a very popular figure in the old days. She had a car accident and she got aphasia after that, and she couldn't speak. And Kurta wrote this piece, which is all about the struggle to make sound. And I know you've written pieces with sign language involved in that idea. I'm very, very interested in the inability to make sound and writing pieces that deals with that kind of issue. So just to give you a little bit of what she says about him and a little bit of their rehearsal in which she's sobbing, and you hear him talking also, and what silences mean to him. So beyond sound, silence is also very important. Please play. Don't give me.
One thing.
I think, when I didn't expand it work or something, I don't know. It's not finished. The minute
What is our work? For me, the words are very important. More important than the action. I was listening to színház, baleset. Nem tudtam beszélni. She's always telling that she lost her possibility of speaking for 7 years. Then she returned and she stuttered. Now is the most important thing. I wrote it for her life as a portrait. To learn this piece. She had a very hard working to learn to be herself in art. It's not the same to stutter in life and not the same to do it convincingly in singing. You understand that was like a couple of training. Really. And it was just I wanted to have a piece where I can play. I am not a pianist, and I can play with one thing almost the whole time. That is sing nothing, and the piano is my beloved instrument. Just because after little better. Nem látom.
Nem, a kezed látom.
Ez a kezed kint van.
Igen.
Van, amikor két kézzel jelent.
Tudom. Érzem.
Jó.
I'll stop it here, but this piece is actually orchestrated. It's the voices around the hall and they whisper back at her. And there's this, it's almost this like Hitchcockian nightmare scene. It's like, I often refer to this like dream that a lot of people have where you try to open your mouth, call for help, nothing comes out. I think that's shared. A lot of people have that idea. And it's about this whole thing of not being understood, still struggle to communicate, to be heard, to be understood, which I find so fascinating given his own little speech, issues and what she went through, and she had to relearn how to make sound, but then to try to recreate that in a musical and theatrical setting after she's partially recovered from it, at least. So again, I would go on with this if I have time, but the whole piece is also online if you're interested. Beckett's, what is the word, by the setting of Beckett's, what is the word by and just to, I did a piece back in 2012 when I was collaborating. We had a huge stage piece called Conference of the Birds, based on the 10th century poem Conference of the Birds by the Persian poet Afro. But I paired that's about, birds. It was a collaboration with the composer who's at UC Davis. I went to school with her and she was a professor there, and this Israeli visual artist who did animation for it. But I paired that with the story of Philomela, I don't know if you know that from Ovid's Metamorphosis. Philomela, just to give you a really short one, and this is disturbing. Her sister, Procne, marries Tereus, I think that's his name, Tereus, and Procne begs her husband to bring Philomela to her, they can be together. So Tereus takes Philomela in the boat, but meanwhile he becomes very lustful of her. And then when they arrive, he takes her into the woods and he rapes her. And she screams out that I am going to tell everybody, I don't care what happens. In order to silence her, he cuts off her tongue. And he locks her in like a cabin. She can't speak, she can't tell everyone what he did, but she ended up like creating a tapestry that told her own story. And somehow that reaches Procne and she finds out what happened. She and Philomela conspire to take revenge on him. And this is a horrible, horrible story. Like I said, I was like, there will be no kids here tonight. So Procne and Tereus have a child in his test. They kill him, they chop him up, and they cook him, the two sisters. And the sister, Procne, is thinking, if I can't, have my own sister, I can't have the son, because he was so much like his own father. It's like a reminder of his violence. So they cook him and they feed it to the husband, and the husband asks for his son, and they say it is inside you. And he actually chases after the women. And as he's chasing after them, Philomela and Procne fly away, and they become a nightingale and a swallow, and he becomes a hoopoe at the end of the story. This is an Ovid. And it's interesting because context of the birds is also all these birds, and the hoopoe is the leader of the birds. So it was an interesting pairing. But I did this piece for just solo voice and the percussionist that was working with us on Conference of the Birds. And it was also about that inability to make sound for me. Like, how do I create this piece with somebody who can't get out? So that was, like I said, it translated into that piece. This was in 2012, so well before the Me Too movement, but it's about like silencing women, violence against women, and how that translates vocally into a piece. And I actually did some research, listened to some other horrific real videos. Actually, there was one that I specifically focused on, and I heard about this, I think, domestic worker in Lebanon who was raped. And there's a video of her being dragged around by these men and the sounds that she makes. I don't even think I made that known to the audience, but it was important to me to listen to that real sound and just know how that affected me in the sounds that I made. So that stuff all comes into it for me as well when appropriate or when related. I was gonna, I'm not gonna play anything else, I think. Yeah, I think I'll stop. I was gonna talk about some other things that I've done that deal with working against cultural erasure and xenophobia that celebrates other cultures, but I think I'll stop here so that we have a little time if anybody wants to comment or ask questions, or whatever. So. Thank you.
We have 7:25, so if you have any last questions, we have time.
Sorry, I was rushing through it, just trying to.
Oh, no, that was very interesting.
I'm interested in maybe how you see this idea of the composer.
You're sitting next to one.
Right. And when you're like doing an improvisation like you did in the first speech, or when you're kind of interpreting a notation in your own, like, do you feel like a co-composer, or when you're improvising, is that for you composing as well? How do you see that in your work?
Yeah, that's complicated. Definitely, I've worked with composers sometimes when I've totally created my own line, my own work. So that's like, yeah, co-composing. Sometimes it just, I think there's a whole spectrum of it. I don't think it fits, but there's a whole spectrum from what I improvise was all me. I didn't even know what I was going to do. I wouldn't call that a composition because it wasn't planned. It didn't have that kind of, I didn't, study orchestration or that kind of thing. I wouldn't call myself a composer, but I do create pieces for myself. I've never written pieces for instruments, so I don't have that skill that, Yvonne has spent years kind of perfecting, to know how to write for the different line. I've thought about it, but never had the kind of time to devote to it and to really study to make sure I do it justice. I don't know if I can, actually, I've never tried it. But yeah, there's a whole spectrum of how much I've contributed creatively, not just as a performer. But these pieces that Afro piece, I feel like they're in layers. So he wrote down the sound. I play with them, I manipulate them, and I feel like because he didn't, but he gives you options that I can do these 3 lines together or leave them out. I have some flexibility in what I expressive dimension I bring to it. I have actually been hard on students at a master class. My students here have not tackled this. I tried dangling it in front of them and they just said, oh, thank you. But I did a master class back in New York when the student came in, totally changed the piece, added electronic stuff to it, and I said, let's be clear, this isn't his piece anymore. This is your remix, your kind of interpretation of it. Let's be sure you respect what the composer's work and what's short, and be clear about that. So, and I had a teacher who actually was she would take much more liberty with changing stuff to whatever she wanted. She actually worked with Messiaen, and at the end of the piece, she wanted to sing a high note. He said no. When he died, she did it. So I'm trying not to do that. She was a big deal. So, yeah. But yeah, so I think there has to be a level of respect for the composer's work and knowing when you can bring your own part to it and when you should be, a little more restricted within what's written.
So that you started with this type of music when you were in school, and so it kind of came from your teacher, wasn't like necessarily a like intentional choice to choose it and stick with it, and so at least from the outset. So why are you still doing this? This particular.
Why did I start it or why am I still doing it?
Why are you still doing it?
Because like I said, I wouldn't have it any other way. It's so much more exciting to me. It's so much opens so many more doors. There's so much broader range of expression. There's so much more that can come into it. So yeah, I don't want to just restrict myself to 1 or 2 things. And if I had more time, I would go explore more things that are on my list that I haven't gotten to. It's only what I've managed to do over the years, not what I would like to do. But when I started, I was a physics major in college. I kind of got into music through just, singing and all that. And I started going to a lot of new music concerts. So when I started studying music, I learned tonal and atonal comp music together. I mean, not so much the theory, but just being immersed in it. So I had no prejudice against dissonance and lack of tonality, and things like that, and looking for, the standard classical music. So that was kind of liberating, I think, to get started that way.
I think I have like a follow-up, more selfish question, which is, you did say before that you have the curiosity to go in many more directions, but just didn't have the time. And so what stops you? I mean, you have lots of commitments, but like to commit to a particular form in this way, what specific thing about it keeps you perfecting this, I guess, instead of going off and doing some of the other things that you might be interested in?
Not sure I fully understand, sorry.
Sorry.
No, I just want to feel not like just BS you and just don't answer.
Like,
I want to understand better.
You were saying there's just so many other things that you wanted to explore, and
like I said, Persian classical music, I wish I could spend
Right.
years just studying it, but go ahead.
and so I guess why land with something here instead of continuing to,
It's real life issue of mine and work and teaching. I mean, I like even those I've done them. I did it when I didn't have a full-time job, because like I said, I had to work on this a lot, hours and hours of drilling and practicing and discovery. So I haven't had time to do these. That's why I didn't do them live for you today, because I wasn't able to, get back into them. But I have studied that stuff, so yeah, there's other stuff that I would love to study, I would love to study all of them, but right now it's just a matter of, it's a very boring answer, sorry, it's just a matter of like limitations of life, time and work. But otherwise, I would be totally game, yeah. Yeah, I would love to go to Korea and to do some Hansori workshops, but not that.
Are those even available?
Yeah.
Oh,
There is one summer program, that my friends have, looked into, and I know this other singer from New York, who's done study Hansori in Korea. She didn't do that workshop, she did something else, but yeah, you can go. I mean, the thing is, I don't know the language, I could never really feel it the way they do, but I could learn better.
Sometimes when you've been talking, you make what seem to me like strange, interesting sounds. As you grew up, did you, were you walking around the house like, I'll laugh or
I think I was.
and so you were interested in what I would call unusual sound.
Yeah, I think I was. I did like doing voices or like imitating things. I never thought it would kind of like feed into my professional work. But yeah, and also I did, like I said, I did a lot of theater when I was in school and also when I was just freelancing in New York. So a lot of that and voiceover work, I was really interested in that kind of work. I did some voiceover work, but I really like doing like cartoon kind of voices and characters. Yeah, so and also like even doing radio work, like I was still aware of how I speak. That was really difficult to deal with. It's one thing to hear yourself sing as a singer, but hearing myself speak is very much other. That was hard because I would go home and I would hear it.
How is it to study some of these forms of music today, particularly over in Asia? I mean, I understand that the university in Aleppo was the sort of center for Asian music, and everything that's been happening in Syria these past few years. How easy is it then to just study and do research?
Well, there are teachers in the diaspora, they're not like in Aleppo, I don't know, but Arabic music is completely different from Persian music. There's some relationship, I shouldn't say. There's like, the Maqam system versus the Radif system, there's different systems. But it's totally different if you want to study. So in Iran, for example, women are not allowed to sing. A woman's voice is as sensual as her hair, so that's why you cover them up and you shut them up. So that's very problematic, but there's actually a very great scholar and practitioner of Persian classical music at UC Irvine, Dr. Umuli. I've studied a little bit with him while I was in California. That's another thing. He would do remote work, and I kept thinking I would do it, and I haven't been able to do that. But yeah, there are people, but there are also like endangered cultures, like the Yazidis. I don't know if you remember, like so much in the news that the ISIS killed all the men and the boys, and they enslaved women into labor and also as sex slaves. And their cultural traditions are dying out. They only had 16 professional musicians left. When I don't know if it was Cambridge or Oxford took on this project to document that music, to record it, to have these women who have been through so much trauma, they form their own choirs and they practice the music. And it's a way to keep their culture alive, but it's also a way of therapy for them. They talked about how it is so helpful for them in their recovery. So there's different things happening. I don't know the whole picture of things, but music in the East, when you say you in the Middle East, probably, right? But yeah, that's the whole thing of like, Korea, Japan, trying to have exhibitions and completely separate. Yeah, so that's what I can speak to more is Iran, but of course, there's war, there's in like Syria, and you said Aleppo, there's so much cultural erasure that goes on, there's cultural genocide that goes on, like when it actually has come up in this what's going on in Ukraine. It's supposed to be that you're not supposed to even be a people, be a country. So we actually did a big benefit concert for Ukraine back in April, and part of that was to raise money and bring attention to the topic. Part of it was to celebrate their culture, so I brought in as many Ukrainian musicians as we could to showcase their music and their culture and to celebrate it. So yeah.
Just a comment. Thank you, Haleh, for this great talk. Actually, so great to hear like how you find this freedom of expression in these kind of in between spaces of improvisation and of true improvisation, which is awesome. And I want you to do more of that, but just like how you just find this expressive space. It's so exciting.
Okay, so that, yeah,
Thank you.
and Yvonne's work is absolutely wonderful and she'll be getting a chance to hear that about her work too, yeah. No, I do, we have opposites next to each other, but I want to see a lot. The weather and hosting and computer, then it just, I got, get a lot of cheese.